what I would consider white people, right?
Hmm.
In England and the United States and other areas where countries were founded by white people, what happened to them that they invited these people to their homes, the country, and they allow them to intimidate them in their own space? What happened to the whites that at home they're afraid to defend their homeland?
It's a really great question, and I think it's got very deep roots. Um, Primarily, I think that I'm going to speak for particularly the English-speaking world because I'm more familiar with that.
Right.
But in the English-speaking world, I think that they forgot that they were a particular culture. I think that they thought that their values were universal, and it's not that their values can't be universal. What it is that their values are just not universally held. There is a particular culture to the English-speaking world, and they forgot this, and so they assumed that everyone thinks that you should form two-parent nuclear families, husband, wife, and a bunch of children.
Yeah.
They thought that everyone would buy into the Protestant work ethic, that people would be incentivized to start small businesses and work very hard for their own benefit, to own private property, and to buy their own house, to own their own business, and to build their own little patch of the world. I think they assumed that everyone would follow that model, and I think there are a lot of immigrants into our countries who do want to follow that model. They look at that model and say, hey, that would work for me. But I also think there are a lot of immigrants in our countries who don't think that, and we haven't been sensitive to that. And so we allow, and one of the primary attributes of the English speaking world is it is what is called individualistic, which means that each person believes in their own personal rights. They
I
don't
like
believe
that.
in group rights,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And so if you have cultures that do believe in group rights moving into an individualistic culture, it's actually quite difficult for the individualistic culture to deal with that, because these groups operate in a different way. They don't see the sort of matrix of trust that is built up in the English-speaking countries. Because one of the things the English-speaking countries do, and Roger Scruton is a great philosopher, British conservative philosopher, who talked about this before he died recently, and he speaks of the ability of the English, particularly, to trust strangers.
Yeah.
Now, this is not something you'll find if you go to, say, Turkey or Uzbekistan or something like this. You don't have a great deal of trust among strangers, and it's because of the kind of, I guess it's appropriate to say, the insular nature of England. It's a very small old place. And so it developed a common law. What is the common law? And this is a law for everyone. And what was really unique about this is they actually put the king below the law, because, of course, in feudal times, the king was the arbiter of the law. The law flowed from the king. It was the king's law, the king's judges, and the king was put there by God. And therefore, if you look at, say, continental Europe, in sort of France and Germany, you get the absolute monarchs who are like, no, I am the state. Whereas in England, the opinion flowed the other way. The king is where he is because we put him there.
Yeah.
And therefore, if we demand the law of the land, and this is specific law of the land, not the king's law, then the king is also beholden to that law, even though he's the one whose job it is to enforce the judgments of the courts. And so this created a very high trust society where everyone was expected to follow the same laws. And therefore, that a stranger has been inculcated into this kind of cultural atmosphere, and you can expect a certain kind of behavior from them. Whereas that's actually really quite unique to the English-speaking world. And this is obviously what England exported to its colonies. And so, America, Canada, New Zealand, Australia, they're all common law countries. And they're better for it. It's much better than the inquisitorial law, Roman law that you find on the continent. Because one of the things that Scruton actually highlights is that for the first time in history, the law was the tool of the common man. So you could bring a lawsuit against someone else who had wronged you,
Yeah.
and the king would have to be on your side to support that because it was his courts you were using to prosecute someone else. This is quite a magical state of affairs, actually. If you think about what law was like all through history, all throughout, in all other cultures, it's actually a very unique thing. And it was the fact that the English-speaking world assumes this is the default because of the default for them is one of the ways I think they tripped themselves up and weren't prepared for these other kinds of cultural attitudes. And I don't want to go on too much about it, but I really think that's the sort of source of the problem, because then when you get sort of group accusations saying, oh, you're oppressing us or something like that, and yet everyone can look around and go, where's the oppression? You know, you've got all the same rights that I've got. How can I be oppressing you? What am I doing? You can, if I'm doing something to you, you can just go to a court and file a civil suit against me and get redress. You know, like all of these same options are open to you. But the cultures that come from this more sort of groupish mentality don't see the world like that, and so they look at things in terms of racial power blocks, and that's just not what the English-speaking world is used to.
Amazing. This is the first time I've heard it explained so perfectly. I've heard portions of that about individuality and things like that, but I never heard anyone lay it out the way you just explained it. And it's so clear, and it makes so much sense. Even when I was growing up, and I grew up on a plantation in Alabama, we didn't grow up as a group. All blacks did not agree with one another because there was a right and wrong situation going on. We knew good from evil. We were individuals. And even as a kid, I never just accepted the okie doke, you know, even with adults, and then I would disagree or agree. Sometimes it got me in trouble. But I grew up as an individual with that mentality, and that's how America was. But now it's so group thinking. And
now they want to claim you, don't they?
Right.
They want to say, well, you're black, you're ours.
And they want to make you be a part of it. They will not accept you want to be an individual.
Yeah, that's a horrible mentality, in my opinion. I mean, obviously I'm not black, so I can't speak to the direct experience of what it's like to have a bunch of activists claiming you as theirs. I can't even imagine.
It's a mess.
I can't, like, if someone said that to me, I would just be like, right, okay, I'm your enemy. You know, like, if you can just you don't own me.
That's
you know,
right.
You don't own me. I'm my own man, you know. So,
if you don't belong to the group, they call you Akatam, the N-word, all kind of names, because you're not a part of a group. It's crazy.
Yeah, frankly, I mean, I would, you know, I'm still an atheist, but I'd still call that evil. I think that's genuinely awful what they're doing is abolishing your own agency.
Yeah,
you know, they're saying you don't get to think, and ironically, they're saying it because you're black. And it's like, sorry, isn't that what the slave owners did? You know, isn't that like
right?
You know, like that's the most retrograde opinion I can ever imagine holding about someone else. And obviously, I don't hold that opinion. So I just find it morally offensive.
Well, that was a captivating explanation of what's going on. That was mind blowing, man.